So if batteries are the missing puzzle piece, does that mean we've finally solved the nuclear dilemma? Not quite. While the technology has evolved and the public conversation is shifting, deep challenges remain. Financing new nuclear plants is still a monumental hurdle. Even small modular reactors, for all their promised cost-effectiveness, are struggling to reach commercial viability. The very first NuScale SMR project in the U.S. was recently canceled due to rising costs and a lack of customer interest, despite years of federal support. It was supposed to be a showcase, a test case to prove nuclear could be smaller, faster, cheaper. Instead, it became another reminder that nuclear still moves slowly in a world that demands speed. But what if we're asking the wrong questions? What if the issue isn't just technology or money, but imagination? Because nuclear power isn't just one thing. It isn't just giant steam turbines and concrete bunkers. The next generation of atomic energy may look radically different, and it's already starting to take shape. Deep in the Utah desert, engineers are testing molten salt reactors, an entirely different class of nuclear technology that replaces water with molten salt as a coolant. These reactors can't melt down in the way traditional ones can, because their fuel is already liquid. They operate at higher temperatures and lower pressures, making them more efficient and inherently safer. And unlike light water reactors, some designs can even consume existing nuclear waste as fuel, turning one of our greatest liabilities into an energy asset. Meanwhile, in Canada, a reactor called the IMSR is being developed to power remote communities and mining operations far from centralized grids. In Japan, researchers are reviving the idea of fast breeder reactors that can generate more fuel than they consume. And in the UK, Rolls-Royce is designing mini-nuclear power stations, manufactured in factories and shipped to sites by truck. These are not science fiction projects. These are real technologies being built right now. And if they succeed, they could upend everything we think we know about nuclear power. Even fusion, the holy grail of energy, is finally starting to feel within reach. For decades, fusion was a joke, always 30 years away. But in December 2022, scientists at the National Ignition Facility in California achieved what was once thought impossible: a controlled fusion reaction that produced more energy than it consumed. It only lasted for a tiny fraction of a second. But it happened. And it proved that ignition is real, not just theory. Now, private fusion startups backed by billions in venture capital are racing to make it practical. Companies like Commonwealth Fusion Systems and Helion are building prototypes that they say could deliver grid-scale fusion energy within the next decade. And while that timeline is wildly optimistic by traditional standards, the fact that anyone's even trying, and getting funding to do it, is a dramatic shift. They're right, fusion could change the world. Clean energy with no long-term waste, no meltdown risk, and nearly unlimited fuel drawn from seawater. It would be the most profound energy breakthrough in human history. And the world would never be the same. But none of this happens in a vacuum. For nuclear to truly rise again, it needs more than innovation, it needs trust. Public fear of nuclear power isn't irrational. It's rooted in real history, in real tragedies, in the lived trauma of people who watched their homes and lives vanish in clouds of radioactive dust. For millions, nuclear still means sirens, evacuations, Geiger counters ticking in panic. Changing that perception takes more than better safety records or cleaner designs. It takes transparency. It takes education. It takes storytelling. That's why countries like Finland have gone all in on public engagement, offering school tours of nuclear sites and live streaming the construction of the world's first permanent nuclear waste repository. They treat citizens not as obstacles but as partners. And it's working. Finland is now among the most pro-nuclear nations on Earth, and their energy grid reflects that confidence. Low emissions, high reliability, and stable prices. That's not a technological feat, that's a cultural one. And if nuclear is going to work in the United States or Germany or Australia, that kind of cultural shift is just as important as the engineering. There's another obstacle, though, one that's far less visible but just as critical: regulation. In most countries, nuclear plants are governed by layers of bureaucracy so thick and slow they practically guarantee cost overruns. And for good reason. Nuclear accidents are catastrophic. Regulators are cautious because they have to be. But sometimes, caution becomes paralysis. In the US, it takes longer to get approval for a new reactor than it does to build the reactor itself. That's not sustainable in a climate emergency. Reforming nuclear regulation doesn't mean cutting corners. It means modernizing the process to reflect current realities. Digital modeling, AI-based safety checks, real-time monitoring. These tools didn't exist when nuclear rules were written. Updating them doesn't compromise safety. It enhances it. But doing that takes political courage, and political courage is in short supply. Yet the tide may be turning. In the last 3 years, over a dozen countries have announced new nuclear initiatives, and for the first time in decades, public opinion polls are moving in nuclear's favor. People want solutions. They want action. And they're beginning to understand that energy isn't just an environmental issue. It's a national security issue, an economic issue, a survival issue. When Texas freezes or California burns or Europe runs out of gas, the abstract becomes real. Blackouts don't care about ideology. And when the lights go out, the question isn't what you believe, it's what works. That's why we're seeing bipartisan support for nuclear legislation in the U.S., something nearly unheard of just a few years ago. That's why Bill Gates is building a next-generation reactor in Wyoming on the site of a retired coal plant. That's why even environmental groups, long opposed to nuclear, are beginning to split. Some still reject it completely. Others see it as a necessary compromise in a world running out of time. The conversation is shifting. Slowly. Unevenly. But undeniably. Still, there is one more question we need to ask. One that sits at the heart of this entire debate. If we finally get nuclear right, if we solve the engineering and the safety and the cost and the trust, then what? What kind of world are we building? Because energy isn't just about watts and megawatts. It's about what we do with them. Unlimited clean power could drive a golden age of human achievement. Or it could deepen the divide between rich and poor, between nations that have and nations that don't. A world of abundant nuclear energy could mean water desalination for drought-ridden regions, industrial development without carbon, even electricity beamed to the moon or Mars. Or it could mean autonomous weapons, surveillance empires, and a new nuclear arms race powered by civilian infrastructure. The line between utopia and dystopia is thinner than we think. And technology alone can't decide which side we land on. That's up to us. So where does that leave us? Are we witnessing the rebirth of nuclear power? Or its last gasp? The truth is no one knows. Not yet. But here's what we do know. The status quo is failing. The world is on fire, sometimes literally, and we are nowhere near where we need to be on emissions, on energy reliability, or on resilience. We've tried hope. We've tried denial. Now we have to try something else. And nuclear, flawed, feared, forgotten, might just be the best option we have left. Not because it's perfect, but because it works. Because when you split an atom, you release not just energy but possibility. The possibility of a planet powered by something more durable than fossil fuels, more stable than sun and wind, more equal than oil empires and gas cartels. A future where the lights stay on, where the air stays clean, where progress doesn't mean compromise, where survival isn't a luxury. That's the promise. That's the hope. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth believing in. The question isn't whether nuclear power is safe. It's whether the future is safe without it. As we stand at the crossroads of a warming world and a rising tide of energy demand, that's the choice we face. Light or darkness, vision or fear, action or paralysis. We've been here before. We built the bomb. We built the reactor. We saw what it could do. Now the world is watching again. And what we choose next could shape everything that follows. The reactor core is ready. The turbines are waiting. The grid is humming. And the clock is ticking. A decarbonized power grid may sound like a utopian fantasy, but it's fast becoming an economic necessity. And few people have pushed harder for that future than Elon Musk. For years, he's championed a world powered by solar panels, wind farms, and colossal battery banks. Tesla's mission statement has never been vague: accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. But in a world where electric demand is skyrocketing and renewables can't always keep up, Musk is no longer shy about supporting nuclear power. In 2022, as Europe scrambled for energy after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Musk called the shutdown of nuclear plants total madness. He urged countries to restart reactors and even volunteered to eat food grown near nuclear sites to prove they were safe. At first, it sounded like one of his typical media provocations. But then the crisis deepened. And it became clear, this wasn't just another tweet. It was a warning. Tesla may not be building reactors, but its survival is tied to the grid. Its megapacks stabilize electric networks across continents. Its supercharger stations operate 24/7, demanding vast amounts of consistent power. And its gigafactories, those massive temples of electric vehicle production, consume more electricity than entire towns. As AI workloads multiply and self-driving systems evolve, Tesla's energy hunger grows exponentially. And when solar falters and wind goes still, there are only two options: fire up more fossil fuels, or go nuclear. Musk may not be investing in reactors today, but he's watching closely. If energy prices surge or the grid begins to buckle under the weight of demand, he won't hesitate. He's made it clear, if nuclear fits the math, he'll be the first in line to scale it. But for all the newfound momentum, the nuclear revival still faces massive roadblocks. To succeed, atomic energy must overcome 5 towering challenges, and each one has the power to derail everything. First and most enduring is public fear. For decades, opposition to nuclear power has slowed or stopped development outright. High-profile disasters like Chernobyl and Fukushima etched deep scars into global memory. Even now, years later, images of exploding reactors and ghost towns continue to haunt the
Blackouts don't care about
To millions,
ideology.
nuclear means catastrophe, not clean energy. It doesn't matter how many engineers explain passive safety systems or meltdown-proof designs. Fear is irrational, and it's powerful. Many people simply do not trust governments or corporations to manage radioactive materials for hundreds or even thousands of years. And that mistrust, fueled by decades of secrecy and broken promises, remains one of nuclear's greatest liabilities. Support for nuclear energy is growing, yes, but it still lags far behind solar and wind. And public opposition can stop a reactor before the first shovel hits the ground. The second challenge is time. Traditional reactors take anywhere from 10 to 15 years to build. And the costs are staggering. A single large-scale nuclear plant can run anywhere from $10 billion to $20 billion. That's a massive upfront commitment in an era of tight budgets and urgent timelines. Worse, many of these projects suffer from massive delays and cost overruns. The Vogtle nuclear expansion in Georgia was supposed to be a flagship revival, a modern reactor project proving that nuclear could still work in the U.S. Instead, it became a cautionary tale. Originally projected at $14 billion, the final bill has surpassed $30 billion. It took more than 15 years to finish. That kind of risk makes nuclear a tough sell, especially when compared to wind and solar farms that can be permitted, built, and connected to the grid in a fraction of the time and cost. Small modular reactors, or SMRs, were supposed to solve that. Factory-built, transportable, cheaper, faster, easier to deploy. That's the promise. But in practice, they haven't yet lived up to it. Not one has been proven at full commercial scale. And even the most promising projects have stumbled. NuScale, once hailed as the front-runner in SMRs, recently canceled its first customer project due to rising costs and a lack of buyers. The concept remains attractive, but until these reactors are built and operated successfully, skepticism will remain. The third obstacle is regulation. In the United States, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's approval process can take 5 to 10 years, before construction even begins. That timeline makes innovation painfully slow. Even SMRs, with their standardized designs and smaller footprints, must crawl through the same bureaucratic maze. Meanwhile, countries like China can approve and break ground on a reactor in under 3 years, giving them a strategic edge in expanding nuclear capacity. While the U.S. delays, China builds. And that imbalance could have long-term geopolitical consequences. But perhaps the most urgent bottleneck is uranium. Right now, 40% of the world's enriched uranium, the type needed for most reactors, comes from Russia. That poses a massive geopolitical risk. In the wake of the Ukraine invasion, Western nations have scrambled to break their reliance on Russian energy. But alternative uranium supplies are limited. The US and Canada are trying to ramp up domestic production, but it's not a switch you flip overnight. Enrichment facilities take years to build. The U.S. Department of Energy recently pledged $700 million to revive America's uranium industry, but until those new capabilities come online, the West remains dependent. And dependency is dangerous. China, meanwhile, has already locked in long-term uranium deals and is investing heavily in fast breeder reactors that can recycle spent fuel. That gives them not only energy security, but also technological leadership. If the US and Europe want to keep pace, they'll need to act quickly, building out enrichment capacity and embracing advanced fuel cycles before they fall irreversibly behind. And that brings us to the final, most haunting challenge: nuclear waste. Every reactor produces spent fuel, radioactive material that remains dangerous for thousands of years. Right now, most of that waste is stored on site in reinforced casks made of concrete and steel. They're designed to last a few decades, not millennia. That's a dangerous gamble. Because no matter how clean nuclear power is during operation, the long-term question remains unanswered. Where does the waste go? In 2025, Finland is set to open the world's first permanent deep geological repository, an underground vault called Onkalo, designed to safely isolate nuclear waste for up to 100,000 years. It's a monumental engineering achievement. But it's also a lonely one. No other country is even close to completing such a facility. Without long-term storage solutions, nuclear waste becomes a political and environmental time bomb, one that could derail the entire atomic renaissance. And yet, despite all this, the nuclear surge is real. New plants are under construction. Governments are pouring in billions. Tech giants are eyeing atomic energy not just as an option, but as a necessity. AI, electric vehicles, data centers, cryptocurrency mining, home electrification, it all adds up to an unprecedented energy demand. The grid is under siege. Blackouts are more frequent. And fossil fuel prices are volatile. In that environment, nuclear power starts to look less like a gamble and more like a lifeline. But momentum isn't enough. Not this time. Nuclear's future won't be one with headlines or political gestures. It will live or die on execution. Can we build faster, cheaper, safer? Can we secure fuel, handle waste, and earn the public's trust? If not, we're headed for another collapse. A rerun of the 1980s nuclear bust, only this time with even more at stake. The year 2025 may be the tipping point. The world is watching. Plans are drawn. Funding is flowing. The reactors are waiting. If we can finally get it right, if we can deliver on the promise without repeating the failures, then nuclear power could become the backbone of a clean, resilient energy system. But if we fail, if costs explode, trust collapses, or waste piles up, then the backlash could be swift and final. There may not be another chance. The clock is ticking. The grid is groaning. And the fallout of inaction would be more than just economic, it would be existential.